drama, of course, I can make a portrait speak, can't I? Because in drama you change according to what you need. It certainly does sound as if that page is important, there's no doubt. Well, the thing is, when I bring the lady forward, she will obviously help you understand your Italian garden. Maria, will you bring your century into our century? These people are modern gardeners, as you were when you were young. In your day, you were a modern gardener. They are trying to make a garden, and they are interested to ask you.
So you are gardeners too? What is it you wish to know?
How long the grass would be?
I always had the grass so that I could walk freely through the garden.
What's the best flowers to use for a garden?
I'm sorry,
What's the best flowers?
Do you need a reminder of your garden? I believe there is somewhere a sketch she made.
Will children be left to walk through the gardens by themselves? Is there any other dangers?
Are you asking me if children could walk through my garden?
Yeah, is there any dangers that could fall into something?
I wish that children could walk through my garden and I could hear them playing.
Were there dangers near your garden?
I made my garden so that it would have no danger now.
See how they're holding the diary now? And this is creating deeper questions. Still on questions. It just sounds as if that page is important. There's no doubt. Well, the thing is, when I bring the lady forward, she will obviously help you understand your Italian garden. Now they have her diary in their hand. She needs help. Will you bring your century into our century? That's the help she needs. These people are modern gardeners, as you were when you were young. In your day, you were a modern gardener. They are trying to make a garden, and they are interested to ask you.
So you are gardeners too? What is it you wish to know?
She has difficulty with stature and size. I understand you have a photograph of the workman who built your garden for you.
I remember it well, yes.
May we look at it?
Yes.
Will you mind?
No, you may look at it.
You have a very rare privilege in this museum. We do have a picture of the actual people who built the garden. Not only the lady who designed it, but we do have this photograph. If you care to leave the diary there and see some of the work folk, and these are the people, I imagine, who would be able to answer the kinds of questions that will help us get our garden ready for Belgium, for the exhibition. And if you would care to work for a while with them in the garden, I'm sure you would pick up a tremendous amount of understanding about the garden, and possibly even learn what happened to the lady. Keep on talking, see if we can get them to come over and help. Spread out a bit.
Was it a big duck pond, I wonder?
Well, I don't even know if they had one. I mean, there wasn't a single duck pond that I could...
I wonder whether there was gravel in the bottom of the duck pond, if there was one.
Were the bushes ever cut? You know, to...
Yes, clipped. Yeah, there was a picture of a clipped hedge in that woman. They were cut, the hedges.
Did they have bridges going over ponds, do you know? Did they have ponds?
Hey, somebody said the hedges were cut. We've got that much. If you get well forward, they might be able to come through. Can you hear? Do you mind again? The hedges. Just stop it a minute. This is confusing, and I apologise because, of course, how they activated the portrait has been cut out. David will have copies of how they did all that, because all the raw material is coming down to Birmingham on Friday. Can you hear, though, at this point, the gardeners are now using 18th century style talk as far as they're able. Some of them are from America, New Zealand, Australia. It's a hard job getting a flavour of an earlier time, sounding like it's okay right now. So my language has changed. You hear it rougher. It's not crude in terms of swearing, but you will hear there's a brusqueness about my negotiations now that are to do with get these people answering for us. These are the people that really know. And so as you listen, I mean, if you can avoid the confusion of brown paper aprons and hats, they had to be made so they fit anybody, so they can give them to the children. The children will become the gardeners of Grantley. And so, it had to show it was just made out of nothing. It is authentic as to bonnets and so on, and overall bib tops and so on. But it's so that it can be very easily shared. So the stage becomes any tool, and the aprons fit anybody, and the bonnets. Because there's always a reason. There's, always going to get many purposes out of things.
Dorothy,
Somebody was wanting to say something.
Yeah, are there any examples, or was it happening here, where their questions were changing?
Yes.
Because they were now wanting to use asking about the garden to find out more about the lady or the children
That's
or the
right.
daisies?
Yes. So if you look at it internally coherently, they've looked at a garden and asked me some questions. I've written them down. I then have created the circumstances in which the same questions are now publicly asked by the children. So my writing down is now irrelevant. They're doing it for themselves. They've publicly asked the lady. She's uncomfortable as yet in role. You'll see her get so much easier. That's her first terrifying beginning, because she knows people don't just answer questions easy and long. They're trying for some depth. And one of her really good responses was when she used the word now. I have tried to make a garden where there is no danger now. That was a superb answer. And you can't drill people into answering. You can only trust that you'll recover them. They must never be made to feel foolishly stared at. And so you can sense Pauline's need for a quietness to get an answer in that. Later you see she's much more composed. So now you see they're asking the same questions but in a much more complex, wider domain way, because these people are more easily approached. These are ordinary gardeners with a kind of a roughness about them. And they're much bolder drawn in the way they talk to the children and touch the children and say, well, if you're going to work alongside me, you better get a hay fork or whatever. So the children are going to be much more loose and much more driving the situation because what's happened between is they have held a diary. They've only held a page, and in one they only discuss the grass. Another page may discuss the disposing of the nymphs on the pedestals. Another, you know, it's all aspects. The ordering of the trees from the nursery and so on and so on. The delivering things. Oh dear. The carter delivering things and so on. So now the children will drive the gardeners. The gardener's job is to create now the 18th century attitude to service. Let's set it up and see what's happening.
Any rockeries again?
Any?
Rockeries, kind of mud things. Rocks. Do you think chicks?
So it had to be an Italian girl. So the missus came from Italy originally.
Yeah.
So when she wanted something really special.
Yeah.
It's very different. I don't think there's anything like it around, you know.
Did she ever watch the children to make sure they didn't get into mischief with it?
Yeah, she liked children coming in. She used to not play with them so much as, like you're saying, just keep an eye on them, you know.
Yeah.
It seemed to give her pleasure.
Was the two different grasses used for two different reasons, or just everything?
It seemed the lady protected things. Maybe grass helped.
How far did you have to walk?
3 days and 3 nights?
Yeah, but how many miles?
I don't know how many miles. It's away down the other end of England, I know that. My feet were sore and I walked as hard as I could, and I walked for 15 hours every day. And I slept under edges.
Where do you come from?
From Somerset. You been there? I wish I could go back, but there's still no word right now. So they tell me. What about this duck pond? What do you want to know about a duck pond?
Because we're making a Italian garden. You know, we
Well, the one we have, I mean, I know it's genuine because the plant she brought from Italy when she came with her. He's over. I don't remember, you know, how old he is exactly, because he looks a bit older than he really is. And of course, I call him sir.
May I ask the old gardeners what these people have been reminding you about? Things you've forgotten in your picture? You've been reminded of anything that you forgot about gardens?
About light. Brown on one side of the tree, the leaves are. So there's a problem somewhere with light.
Dorothy, is this bit that we're still doing, that's still part of the holding system? This questioning?
Yes.
Yeah. Because I'm sort of working
Yes.
with that.
Yes. We've got our input. We keep now moving back. You see, we went back to an orientation system at the point at which I became the lady in the National Trust. I reorientated it, and I honoured their previous work, because it was Mrs. Heathcote who taught them then.
Right.
And now I'm the National Trust lady. Oh, thank you very much, David. That's fine, thank you. I've got it. Aye, and I'll remember it this time. Thank you. Then there's an input system. The diary was an input system, handling the christening robes and this, that and the other. All on that table is an input system. Then there's the holding system is starting to come when they're registering in groups what they want to ask the gardeners. There's a processing system which you haven't seen because Lance has cut it out, when they have to awaken the portrait.
Yeah, so...
See, I awakened the lady.
The hot seating processing thing is no, hang on, the hot seating awakening thing is a process, isn't it? Because I put down from what you said yesterday, that it's like a concrete action, it's actually doing something.
It's doing something.
So talking to the portrait, the hot seating thing is...
Yes, yes,
That would be a
yes,
process.
yes.
That's what
But, in regard to the lady, Thank you, David. I activated the lady and I activated it at two levels. One, to keep Pauline comfortable. She was so nervous. So I stayed beside her, because to leave her would have been to place her in an impossible position. You see, she's too subtle a mind to do it glibly. She knows there's so much more to it, and she also knows she can't do it. When we came to awakening the gardeners, they did it themselves. Because my model alerted them to, well, they didn't use my system at all. Because they didn't like my system. You know, they didn't want to go and lead people out by that. In internal coherence then, the gardeners are now, the gardeners are creating a garden through talking to gardeners who did create an Italian garden. It's just box within box within box, but it's absolutely on the ball of when we finished, we'll know what an Italian garden is like and why.
Dorothy, can I just ask a quick question? I don't want to...
Yeah.
Is there a potential of an emergence of conflict in the internal coherence caller, that as they're getting closer to what is at one level a mystery,
that's right,
that they want to know more about that, and yet they're faced with gardeners who are talking about flowers and gardens?
Exactly, yes. But the gardeners all know they are to develop the mystery. That is one discipline they were bound to. As people in the portrait, they knew somewhat of what had happened, but not all of them knew the same thing.
Isn't the internal coherence maintained anyway by the fact that although they found out about the mystery, the more they found out about that, the point is they want the garden recreated to keep the monument going.
Yes.
So therefore they still want to do the garden in order to keep the monument.
I'm trying to think, if I was that age, what I'd start to get more interested in. And I'm just interested that the teacher might think that coherence is as you described it, but aren't we as teachers as well to sort of twig where they're moving on to? And if that becomes more important to them, we might have to shift the...
But you can, you see, you're very flexible. Sorry.
Oh.
So you could actually recreate the children, couldn't you? And that's
Well, you could if you wanted. Actually, they did. They recreated the death of the children. But it's natural that they're very, very interested to find out what happened. But because you're using roles, I couldn't have done it in this way without my teaching group. Because you're using roles, they could find out what happened through the eyes of a gardening person. That's the discipline for the role. All my images in role will come from growing and weeding and planting and kneeling on the earth and discarding and watching and waiting. That philosophy will be what bases everything I do about young kids. Does that make sense? Because as a gardener, you go back to Dylan Thomas. The undertaker measures with his eyes the passers-by for shrouds. The gardener knows time and seasons, and littleness grows up to bigness. So when children are contemplated and tragedies, you're discussing people as weeds, as plants, as growing. That was the discipline for the teacher.
So as well as the role allowing some distancing, and it doesn't get too hot too quickly,
That's
you're seeing quite poetic images that later become very important.
Yes.
Yeah.
Why introduce the lady? Why introduce Grantley?
Yeah.
Remember, we haven't got an academic axe to grind, other than Lance's need for a paper and Derek's interest. He was going to take those kids to Grantley, and an Italian garden was one of the things he didn't want them to just run through. People, can I just call my colleagues from the college round me? Have you managed to find anything out?
Yeah, I did. In the pond because the children. And that's why Susie can't find out how they fell in there.
They'd wandered down because it was at the other end of the garden and they'd just gone in.
And just fallen in the river? I bet she got into hot
The
water.
girl said that she didn't want to tell us a lot about it, that she said they'd fallen in, and when they went down to the river and they just disappeared, they never came back. And when the gardener was working near the pond, the lady who was on the portrait come along and told her to move. She didn't want us down near the river.
So it was, you felt that corroborated that it was a painful spot?
And when we started talking about our children and how they went in the garden, she asked us to talk about something else. She looked a bit distressed over it.
Yeah. Did you get any impression there were parts of the garden she never went into?
Yes. One near the river, sort of. She didn't go anywhere near the river to pick flowers.
So she sort of made a forbidden area for herself?
And they wanted her to have a river in the, well, like a pond in the garden itself, and she wouldn't have one. She didn't want one in the garden.